visuals. I don't think we ever get to.
Yeah.
I don't think this ever happens. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a few minutes where I can be on camera
Okay.
as well, so
All right.
figure it would.
Well, let's proceed. I have gathered us all together today to talk a little bit about trust in role playing, and there are some things I think we're all familiar with that people have good excuses for. I mean, there's kind of a good excuse for each of them, but they get when as soon as they hit a certain point, you realize that the excuse isn't good enough after all, right? And so, and then my claim is that there are basic ones that I guess we can kind of understand. Then there are some things that are just weird. But my most important point is that if you're playing something that calls itself Dungeons and Dragons, these behaviors just jump way up. You see behaviors from people that you don't see when they play any other game, and you see them across more of the players than you ordinarily do. Right? So is my topic fairly clear anyway? I mean, am I making sense on like what I'm talking about? I mean, I haven't said what the behaviors are yet, but so we played a game which is tagged as D&D in its way, and the question is, what do we think about what we did? And it's not. I'm not going to make accusations. I'm not going to like call for confessions or anything. I kind of want everybody to think about it or whatever and say whatever you want to say, but maybe any conclusions we have, are for later, or for whatever you want to think about for later. Okay, so going back to the familiar things that people do that kind of have a kernel of truth. I'm thinking of the way that when you get to a doorway or something, especially like a door into somewhere, and there is this circular discussion that never gets off the ground about what we're going to do. And if you guys familiar with that, when everybody just starts nattering about, and a suggestion is thrown out, but it doesn't really get discussed. It just gets overrun by the next suggestion, and people start making announcements like, I climb up on the roof, right, or something like that. But we don't know if the character really does that because we're supposed to be discussing what we're going to do. Right. So this kind of behavior where the characters are kind of milling around, and the fiction's making no sense. I mean, all these warriors and wizards are standing around in front of this door, saying, I don't know, what do you want to do? Right. It makes no sense at all. So, Ibars, does this sound familiar? Have you seen people do this?
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
Plenty of time.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the call. It shows up in Call of Cthulhu a certain amount in my experience. That's why I was
millions of times.
Yeah,
millions of times.
So there's that, and then there's the interesting verbiage, which is like, can I and what if I? What if I do this? Can I do that? Now I'm going to be pretty forgiving. Sometimes the person's just like figuring out the system. And they want to know, if I make this roll, is there some horrible chance that I'm going to cut my own throat by accident? Right. I mean, I just want to know, how does this work? And I get that. But as I say, a lot of these behaviors aren't so bad. It's just that they can hit a quantity where you start wondering what the hell is going on. Right. So they'll hit a quantity of people asking this way. So, and so that's one thing. And then the third, for the familiar ones, is kind of what I like to call pop-up characterization. Like the person will put on a voice, or they'll suddenly start talking about the character's backstory or whatever, just kind of out of nowhere. And it feels like, really, in my opinion, it feels really forced. I mean, there's no real reason for and they haven't even really played the character yet in some cases. We haven't seen them do anything. So it's not like, it's kind of like they're saying, well, I better make sure this is like good role playing, right? I better make sure it's good. I'm going to put in all this characterization. Again, I mean, it's not so bad. I mean, anyone wants to characterize their character, sure, but it's when it feels weird and like inserted strangely, and there's like it's out of keeping with the way everyone else is talking, and it's not relevant to what's going on. Those are some little things. I don't know if anybody wanted to talk to us about any of those at
I
this point.
I think I have one thing to
I
say
wanted
about.
to
I
jump
think
in.
Okay.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you go ahead. I will go after you.
Okay. Here come the excuses. So, one thing, the interface, this distance communication just made me very, very self-conscious about stepping stepping on people's input or blocking other moves. So that's why, at least I felt myself tempted all the time to do this permission seeking and should I go? Who's going to go? So that's I think one thing that was inhibiting me.
I definitely see that everything that I just mentioned, as I say, I consider all the ones I just mentioned, these are all the ones that have kernels of function or kernels of
Yeah.
truth that make sense in their way. And different people as well, right? I mean, we haven't played before with a group of us
No.
hasn't played together, and you all know
Correct.
that we're play testing, and so sometimes a rule's going to do this. So I'm going to say, I don't have a rule for that. I don't know. Let's do this, right? So that solidity isn't there either. Yeah.
So okay, that was my input. Go
Right.
head to someone else. See what
Yeah,
else.
Lorenzo,
Someone else.
what were you thinking?
Uh, about I think the second point mostly that you described. There was a distinct moment during play that I thought of when you were describing it, which was when we got to the walls of the secluded area. The ancient part of town where we didn't know who would be living in. And you started describing how there was signs of a siege. And I asked,
Oh, that's right.
you made us roll. And I asked, would it make sense to assume this is happening? And I did that and I realized, oh, no, that's not going to work. And that's precisely the kind of situation that is going to lead to what you're describing, because we do some skill rolls, you do your spot check. I mean, DD is obsessed with the spot skill that does everything. And then you get a result that often is not, it's a big ball of nothing. And so you start speculating and you start saying, okay, will it make sense does it look like this?
Oh, I
Does
see.
this
Sort
make
of like, does
sense?
it look like this? Does it look like that? Could it be this?
Yeah,
Could it be
it's
that?
does it look like they are trying to tear down the walls but not getting inside? And you try to, there is this very nasty expression, but is called pixel beaching, and you're trying to step by step get closer to an answer from the DM. And one thing I appreciated during play was how very often, I don't know if this is by design of the lamentation or it's how you like to run things, is how our origins, the ground where we lived, what we did, was the trigger to get information without roles, without negotiation,
Right.
without questions.
For me, that's very much a sorcerer and a circle of hands thing. It's definitely not in the
Yeah.
rules of Lamentations.
But I think it works really well for this because
I
with
can't
the
imagine playing
diversity.
without it.
Okay.
For me, it helps to have a designated cognitive space to say,
Yeah.
okay, this is what you do get, and we're done talking. There are no more buttons to push, right? To find
Precisely.
out more.
I think that
right? We're done.
for these
we're
kind
done
of
here. Now this is what you get. And it's tricky because that reaches us into this other trust issue, which I'm going to get to in a bit. In fact, I might as well move into this. Now I'm going to move into things that I think have less of a basis in functional or reasonable questions. And they're only weird when they start getting really, really constant or applied just whenever. But these things are a little bit strange. And maybe I'm old and think that they come from computer games sometimes or something like that, but maybe not. But this is, well, it goes to that scan thing. If there's a roll, or even if there's no roll and you just are asking, what do I see? Do I see something like this, right? It's kind of constant. There's no off switch for perception in play.
Yeah.
I mean, for the players I'm talking about, or in the psychological state that I'm talking about, there's no off switch. If you have rolled perception and you get an answer, it's as though the answer's done, and whatever happens next is still open for a new perception check. You know, I mean, it's like, oh, is something sneaking up on me? Rattle, rattle. No, nothing's sneaking up on you. Yeah. Well, there's something sneaking up on me now, right? It's Sean. Does that make sense? Right? It's this kind of it's like I said. There's no the perception check doesn't go forward. There's no security in it. You haven't
right
yourself, and so the person's like always. It's just like if it's an active check, they say I scan. If it's a passive check, they're asking for another one. If it's if even worse, if it's a secret check, right? The DM is rolling for you, and then that's just out the window. I mean, now the ninja's got to do it all the time, right? So and as far as I can tell, it's just raw fear. I mean, it's just raw fear. They're going to get me, right? The game is going to get me. The DM is going to get me, and I have just got to keep the antenna up and waving, right? And if I don't, that means I drop my guard, right? I mean, so that's one thing. There's no designation of, okay, you made the perception check. Nothing seems to be coming. Can you please just act like nothing's coming for, a minute or two? Right?
Correct.
It's kind of like it's like you feel there's no contract on the DM's part not to kill you with a surprise, having made your perception check. And you're like, well, no, I can't trust that bastard, right? He's going to get me. He can always say that the perception check ran out. So.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Can I add something?
Yeah. I have.
Wait, Ibar's first. Yeah.
Okay. I found a partial solution to that perception check in my Call of Cthulhu games, because in nearly all my Call of Cthulhu games, all the players tend to become paranoid in a short time.
Oh yeah.
Like they act. Yeah. So I describe all the environments beforehand, like when they enter a room or something like that. I don't allow them to make perception checks. I just look at their character sheet and their percentage of successfully noticing something, and if in my head if they're above a certain level, I just said, well, you found this, you found that.
Right. The thing that I think is worthwhile here is that, as we were talking about, when do the players know that they've seen what they're going to see, and they spot what they're going to spot, and they notice what they're going to notice, and we're done with that shit now. This is the environment of perception that you're in. And if something's going to get you, another perception check isn't going to help. Mm-hmm. Right? And if something's not going to get you, then then good, right? And so it's so there. If you don't have that, if you don't know, like, when your perception check, how long is it good for, or something like that, then you get this kind of fear, playing in a defensive crouch, I call it, right? Go ahead, Eric. Sorry, I forgot.
If I could.
Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, that's all right. I think in the rules, like the rules that's available, say something effect, try to open doors again if you failed. Like if you've that door, there's something, most tries aren't going to do it. It's that baked into the resolution system.
Yeah, we're
and then
done.
the fiction just has to go with that. It's like, for some reason, no. And again, maybe some rules reminder to the effect, to try to maybe deke around that apprehension players have, to say, look, You're going to make your perception check. Your DM's going to answer as honestly as possible. But after the check, that's it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
your eyes have scanned the room and your ears have opened, and that's it.
Mhm.
And if someone wants to be, really, precise about rules, say, well, let's consider this a 10-minute exploration turn or whatever.
Right.
But you don't have to time it. I think you just really have to say perception check was
this
made
is-
for this
Yeah,
room.
it's behavioral.
That-
You get
that's
what
it.
you get. Yeah. And so I agree that something like that is really called for. I'm interested in the state of minds of fear and mistrust that leads to that. Yeah.